All right, so are you ready to unpack this Trump town hall?
Oh, absolutely.
We've all seen the headlines flying around, but today we're going to do a deep dive into this piece from the Daily Beast.
Okay.
Get ready, because we're going to be dissecting sound bites, political strategy, and some seriously eyebrow-raising moments.
Sounds good.
And maybe more importantly, we'll be analyzing what this event reveals about the current political landscape, especially with the presidential election in full swing.
Definitely.
This wasn't your average town hall, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was exclusively women in the audience. And in Georgia, no less, a state Trump really can't afford to lose.
Yeah, and understanding that context is really key here.
Okay.
Trump is very deliberately tailoring his message for this specific audience and platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much about governing as it is about energizing his base.
And he goes after the Democrats hard?
Oh, yeah.
He calls them the enemy within, throws around Marxists, communists, and fascists. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely not subtle.
When I read that, I actually thought, is he about to burst into flames?
Maybe I'm being dramatic, but still, this isn't exactly subtle wordplay.
Not at all.
Yeah.
This kind of rhetoric. It's a recurring theme for Trump.
Okay.
He frames his opponents not just as political rivals, but as existential threats to the nation. He's not really trying to refute their policies directly. It's more about painting them as inherently dangerous.
And he seems to have it out for Nancy Pelosi in particular.
Yeah.
He even
Yeah.
brings up her husband and the attack he survived.
This is a calculated move.
Okay.
By linking Pelosi to these extreme labels, especially after the attack on her husband, he's aiming to further demonize her among his supporters.
But then he turns around and insists he's not being threatening at all.
Right.
He claims the Democrats are the real threat, even comparing himself to Al Capone because of the investigations he's facing.
That's classic Trump
Yeah.
deflection.
Huh.
By claiming he's the victim of politically motivated attacks, he tries to discredit those investigations and cast doubt on their legitimacy. It's like he's saying, look at me, I'm the real victim here, even though he's the one using such strong language.
Yeah.
It's almost comical if it weren't so concerning.
And this deflection tactic feeds into a larger strategy of creating a siege mentality.
Okay.
This idea that he and his supporters are under constant attack, which further solidifies their loyalty.
Right. It creates this us versus them narrative where he's the underdog fighting back against a rigged system.
Exactly.
And this town hall really put a spotlight on how much Trump is focusing on gender and social anxieties as part of that strategy.
Absolutely. The Daily Beast article mentions how strongly the audience reacted to the question about transgender athletes.
Okay.
This is a prime example of what we were just talking about, tapping into pre-existing anxieties to energize a particular segment of voters.
He really knows which buttons to push, doesn't he?
He does.
He throws out words like crazy, plays on fears of unfair competition, and then offers a simple solution. The president bans it.
It's a calculated approach.
Yeah.
By positioning himself as a strong leader with easy answers to complex issues, he appeals to voters seeking certainty and security in an increasingly uncertain world.
It's interesting because this feels very reminiscent of his 2016 playbook. He's focusing on a core group of voters, zeroing in on these cultural flashpoints and really hammering home that us versus them narrative.
Yeah.
Do you think this strategy will be as effective this time around?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
There are a few key differences this time.
A lot has changed since 2016. The political landscape feels even more polarized now.
Exactly. And while this culture war strategy might resonate with a segment of his base, it could also alienate moderate voters he needs to win. It's a gamble.
So it's like he's playing to his base and hoping for the best with everyone else. But hold on, going back to the article for a second. Didn't Trump also compare himself to Lincoln at one point?
He did. It's fascinating how he draws these parallels between himself and such iconic figures. By aligning himself with Lincoln, he's tapping into a deep well of historical reverence, even if the comparison is tenuous at best.
It's almost like he's trying to rewrite history or create this narrative where he's part of this grand tradition of strong American leaders.
Precisely. And that's a powerful narrative, whether or not it aligns with reality. It's about shaping perception and controlling the narrative.
Okay, so we've talked about Trump's strategy, but what about the Democrats? How do they even begin to counter this kind of messaging, especially if it's as effective as it was in 2016?
That's the million-dollar question. One challenge they face is that directly engaging with these sorts of attacks risks legitimizing them or alienating those moderate voters we talked about. It's a delicate balancing act.
So it's not just about what they say, but how they say it. They can't get dragged into a shouting match, right?
Right? They need to find a way to address these anxieties without getting pulled into a rhetorical mudslinging contest. It's about offering a compelling alternative vision for the future without resorting to the same divisive tactics.
So how do they do that? How do they reach those voters who might be drawn to Trump's message of simplicity and strength?
That's what they're struggling with right now. It's about threading the needle between acknowledging the very real anxieties many voters have while also offering realistic solutions that go beyond simplistic slogans.
It feels like they're constantly on the defensive trying to clean up the mess while also trying to get their own message across.
And they're doing it in a media environment that Trump is incredibly adept at manipulating. He understands the power of a good soundbite, of grabbing attention, even if it means courting controversy.
Yeah, we saw that with the whole father of IVF comment at the end of the town hall. Where did that even come from?
It's a classic example of his tendency to make bold, often baseless claims designed to distract and deflect. While it might seem nonsensical on the surface, it serves a purpose: to dominate the news cycle and keep his opponents off balance.
It's like a magician constantly throwing out distractions so you don't see what's really going on.
Exactly.
So as we navigate this crazy political landscape, what are some key things we should be watching for, especially given what we've unpacked from this town hall?
The most important takeaway is to be mindful of the strategies at play. Don't just focus on the surface-level rhetoric, but try to understand the deeper motivations and potential consequences of the messages being conveyed.
It's about thinking critically about what we're hearing and why we're hearing it.
Precisely. And remember, elections are ultimately about choices. As we get closer to November, pay close attention to the choices being presented, not just in terms of policy, but also in terms of the kind of leadership and future being offered.
Because those choices have very real consequences for all of us.
They do.
This town hall might have just been one event, but it feels like a microcosm of the bigger political dynamics at play.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And understanding those dynamics is crucial for navigating the months ahead.
Absolutely. So as we head into the final stretch of this election season, any parting thoughts on how we can be more discerning consumers of political information, especially with all the noise out there?
It's more important than ever to stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, stay curious.
Right.
Don't take anything at face value, dig deeper, question assumptions, and really seek out diverse perspectives.
Easier said than done sometimes, right? But it's that critical thinking that can help us cut through the noise and make informed decisions.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, this isn't just a spectator sport. These political dynamics, these strategies, they directly impact all of us.
They do. And being aware of them, being able to see them for what they are, that's the first step towards navigating this landscape effectively.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. Me too. It's always fascinating to kind of peel back the layers and see how these events reflect the larger political stage.
It is. And thanks to you, our listeners have a lot more to ponder as we get closer to November. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll be here to help you unpack the answers.